sua aceitação. Mas o samba brasileiro já nasce no coração, já nasce no coração. Tu que una vez me quisiste y a mí me dijiste te quiero a ti.
I'm going to ask the same kind of question with respect to the pragmatist view of truth, the view favored by the fathers of North American philosophy. Here, the tension seems to be that the general idea here is that truth is made. Something is true if it works, where, of course, works will be declined in different ways, and these are very sophisticated philosophers, so I'm simplifying a lot. But the tension, the prima facie, the tension seems to be that if there were to be dialetheists, this would commit you to there being practical dialetheists. Some belief would work and fail to work at the same time. Could you diffuse this worry?
Yeah, look, pragmatism is a view that's associated with many American philosophers. But the sort of founding fathers of American pragmatism, Peirce, James, and Dewey, actually all articulated the view in different ways. So, a careful discussion of this would have to untangle the different varieties of pragmatism. But as you sort of indicated, what's really at, I think probably the simplest way of capturing all these things under a simple rubric is that verification, that truth is verification. It's a species of verificationism. And if it doesn't work in practice, you might well take that to be showing that something is not verified. Okay. So let's talk about verification first, and then come back to working in practice. Suppose you think that truth equals verification, which is, of course, a view that's been held by a number of philosophers, not just pragmatists. Then for things to be true, they've got to be verified. There's got to be the appropriate kind of verification. In mathematics, verification usually amounts to proof. So the question is, can you prove contradictions in mathematics? And the answer is certainly, yeah, if you subscribe to some branches of mathematics. Or can you prove the liar sentence? Okay, yeah, you know exactly what a proof is like. If we're dealing with sort of more contingent contradictions, such as those involved in motion, then verification is going to involve not just theory, but sort of measurements. We're going to have to ascertain that things are moving and so on. So the verification is going to be complex, it's going to be theory-driven and so on, but there's actually no reason why that kind of verification cannot be obtained. Okay. So certainly in principle, verifiability does not rule out dialetheism. It just means that some contradictions can be verified. All right. But then there's the sort of the corollary of this that you mentioned, which is that it's got to work in practice. And practice means to do with human actions and the way we apply theories and so on. Now, again, I think the first thing to note is that dialetheists, like the liar paradox and the other paradox self-reference, don't bear very heavily on action. They don't come into going to the bank in the morning, making breakfast, etc., etc. But dialetheism can certainly have practical consequences. For example, they motivated me to write a book on dialetheism. So, you know, the fact that there are true dialetheists, the fact that I believe it, certainly have practical consequences. So even in this area where contradictions are very remote from action, they have practical consequences. Okay, what about contradictions that are less remote from human activity? So you might say, well, you can't get on a bus and not get on the bus, right? You either bloody get on it or you don't, end of story. Maybe that's true. I think for some kinds of actions which are much more theoretically loaded, this is not so obvious. This may bring us back to some discussions about law, which we haven't had yet. However, let's assume that's right. What this shows is just that not every contradiction is a candidate for a dialetheia. We actually haven't discussed the question of how you judge whether something's a dialetheia. At least I don't remember discussing that. But let's assume that everything I've said so far about this is right. It just shows that there are some things which aren't candidates for dialetheia. Does it show that your action cannot be guided by dialetheism? Absolutely not. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose that Jesus is a man and not a man. Okay, I'm not talking about Jesus Christ, maybe some Jesus in Mexico City. All right. Suppose I believe that Jesus is a man and not a man. Suppose I desire to see a man. Well, I can satisfy that desire by seeing Jesus. Suppose I desire to see something that's not a man. Well, I might go and look at a tree. But if I believe that Jesus is not a man, I can see Jesus. So if I desire to see a man and desire to see something that isn't a man, I can satisfy both desires at once by looking at Jesus, right? So my simplest action is not going and look at a person and looking at a tree, it's looking at Jesus, right? So if that's a dialetheia, that Jesus is a man and not a man, then it certainly has implications for how I act. And it could be very efficacious. I mean, I can satisfy both desires in one hit.
O bolero tem cadência, para muitos sem igual, mas não tem toda a influência quando chega o carnaval, quando chega o carnaval.